I think I've gotten to the point where I'm like, no is so fine. Like, I'd rather get a no than wonder if there was ever a yes. And so I think it's so fine to ask for help. It's, there's levels to that. Obviously, some people do take that too far, and I probably have in the past too, who knows? But I think like, yeah, reaching out is fine. I have had that happen to me and I love it. And all I want to do is to be able to be that person for someone that I've had people be for me. Like, that's the dream, is just to like, how do you keep moving forward and bringing the other people up with you, right? Like, you're only as good as the people around you. So yeah, I think if you're ever wondering if you should send an email, just do it. What's the worst? You never hear back? Sure, you haven't lost anything.
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy, with yours truly, Michael Kahan.
This is not a chat you want to miss. Amy has a great energy about her. She's kind, funny, insightful, and a great conversationalist. The vibes were flowing. The stories were inspiring. This chat was a lot of fun. I particularly enjoyed Amy's take on rejection and the word no, which we dive into. We can all take a little bit of wisdom from Amy's book. It was simply captivating. Anyway, let's get into it. Amy Louise Ruffle is an actor, comedian, and producer, best known for her lead role as Sirena in Netflix's Mako Mermaids, as well as various stage productions here in Australia, as well as Los Angeles. Amy is also a trained improviser who's performed musical improv at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theatre in Los Angeles, and currently performs improv at the Comedy Republic Theatre in Melbourne. She's also a classical and contemporary singer who can also be heard hosting several podcasts, such as The Shake It Up Show. The series is about different experiences in the Parkinson community, discussing a range of things, including the road to diagnosis, coping with change, different therapies and interventions, misconceptions, and everything in between. So as you can imagine, we dive deep and we cover a lot, and we chat about starting again, improv, taking a break from acting, producing, being an athlete and disordered eating, new takes on success, leaving LA, comedy tribes, happiness, Wil Anderson, writing, thank God you're here, plus plenty more. Before we get into this chat, in case you aren't aware, the videos are now available on YouTube under Michael Kahan. That's Kahan with a K, unless you're listening to it already. I'll still be posting snippets of these chats on Instagram under Funny in Failure, so check them out if you want to stay in the loop for upcoming episodes, or you want to ask a guest a question. I'd also love it if you would share the podcast or share your takeaways from the chat. It really motivates me, helps the podcast grow, and ensures I can lock in amazing guests like this one. And just as a final reminder, the podcast comes out every Monday at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, with the video to follow the following day. Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's epic episode. Actually, we were talking about Thank God You're Here, and this has been my favorite Australian show of all time. I'd love for you to tell me how you got involved in it and what it is about, because I absolutely love it and it's the best thing in the world, and I'm going to stop raving about it.
No, I love raving about it. I think it's the best thing in the world, and it's still such a pinch me moment to be a part of it. I can't believe that I have been so fortunate to get to work on something that is just so silly and fun, but also taking silliness and fun very seriously, which is my favorite sort of overlap on the Venn diagram. Deadly serious about the dumbest stuff. But yeah, Thank God You're Here is awesome. I watched it obviously as a young person, and thankfully they did the casting in a very untraditional way. They scouted people from live improv shows, and I do a lot of improv, so a twist of fate that my, I guess, traditional television background and then live improv crossed over perfectly at the time they were bringing it back.
That is, okay, I'm so proud of you. This is amazing. It's the best show ever, even though it's not like Whose Line Is It Anyway, but it's probably the closest thing we have for all the other non-Australians. Isn't it crazy? Because everyone has talked about improv's not a real job. What are you doing? And then now you can like finally tell everyone. I know it helps with the acting, all the other stuff. but now you can finally say it is a job and you're on this amazing TV show, and that all your many years of studying and practicing has actually benefited you.
Yes, somewhat paid off for being a part of like a very cool cult, I guess, where you pay lots of money to to make up stuff and be a child. But no, it's great. I think the most wonderful thing is it's sort of making improv more accessible and recognizable to a broader audience. Because I think particularly in Australia, improv still doesn't have much of a recognition beyond your Whose Line Is It Anyway, which is a specific form of improv, that short form. I don't do that at all. I only really do long form improv. So Thank God You're Here is so great in that it's showing a version of that to an audience and hopefully getting them a bit excited to go and see some improv in the wild too.
I agree. And when I first watched Thank God You're Here many moons ago, I think that's what planted the seed for me to do a few classes as well. So did you know that people were scouting when you were doing the shows? Were you aware, or you only found out afterwards?
I had no idea, and so it was such a shock. And it is those crazy things how nothing changes overnight, and I can definitely look back at all of the incremental little things that led to being able to book that job. But at the same time, I did end up getting a call that in that split moment, your whole life and trajectory of the year changes. So it's crazy that, I was just doing a show that is fun to me and a great way to hang out with people that I think are funnier than me. And then all of a sudden it got me a job.
How do you think, I know this is a great what if, how do you think you would have responded if you knew there were people watching you in the audience? Would you have thrived like you did going up?
Oh, good question. Yeah, I think it's interesting because you might start being like, well, what do they want to see, or that kind of thing. I think, that's the brilliance of the way they cast it, because they saw people in their organic element rather than an audition which is so false and calculated.
Yep.
And they were looking for not just like funny improvisers, but I guess a specific skill set that lines up with what your job requires on Thank God You're Here. So the fact that they were just witnessing people doing their version of improv, I think was really important to being able to cast the people that would then translate best onto that show.
Oh, it looks like a match made in heaven. I haven't watched all of it yet, but from what I've seen, it just looks like a great oiled machine. Like everyone's been doing it for so long, and you probably met most of the people there for the first time, and that's what makes great TV and great collaborations as well.
Absolutely. Like Working Dog is a phenomenal production company. They run such a tight, well-oiled ship, like you said, that then allows us to then go crazy in the silly of it because everything else around it is so well structured and organized. That's
so great to hear. Everyone always raves about them. I'm also thinking from the live perspective. When you do improv, is live, but when you do Thank God You're Here, it's live to an audience as well. So is there a difference in your mind, or no, you're just doing improv?
I mean, no, it's funny with the show then airing how detached I feel from the actual episodes that go to air, because on the day you're doing it in front of a live audience. And so to me, by the end of taping, that's a completed process for me. I've got to do my job, have the response and feedback from the audience. It's done and dusted. And so a lot of times I'm like, I don't really want to watch or need to watch the episode because I've already had my full experience with that creative run. So it's been a really interesting experience in that sense. But yeah, it feels really similar in that the whole rule of improv and why I love it is you just have to be present, listen and respond. And the same stuff is going on at Thank God You're Here. So yeah, same rules apply.
I feel like there's a journey there, because when I first started, whether it was a podcast or I've done something very minor, I would watch it over and over because I wasn't that confident in myself to realize, and so I could get better. And there's nothing wrong with either or. But now that you've been doing this for so long, is it more like, as you said, you've experienced it, you know what's happened, and you don't need to go back and watch it? Because from my understanding, a lot of people, there's been a journey of being able to kind of let go once they've done a performance, but at the start of their career, not necessarily.
Yeah, I think it's a balance, because there can be merit to watching stuff back in terms of like an educational thing, because sometimes what you think you're doing might not be translating to what is coming across on screen. So there's certainly, I've watched some of the episodes for that sort of education reason, to make sure, particularly because you're doing it for a live audience, that your performance is still registering for a screen audience too. But once that's sort of sorted in my head, and I've gotten better at trusting that if if there's feedback that needs to be given to me, it will be. It's someone's job to sort of the director, for them to pass that on. But that is such an uncontrollable outcome, what ends up on screen, whereas my experience of doing it on the day is what counts and is what I derive the joy from.
Nice,
so I sort of
like
don't want to, take that, but watching it sort of takes away from what I remember of the day. So I'm like, you know what, that was like where I got the best out of it, had the most fun, and that's how I derive meaning from that experience. The version that goes to television sort of doesn't matter to me.
Oh, I love that perspective. That is very rare. You're talking about you collaborating and working with the team well, but also it's about you and your journey and how you feel. And we don't always think about that. Like, I know as a people pleaser, and I don't know if you've had experiences there where it can be all about everyone else, not necessarily ourselves. And obviously we need to work with people, needs to work, but you're also talking about it is your experience and you allow for the play and fun. Very rare. Is it something you've always had, or is it something you've learned? Is it even something you think about?
I mean, I think about it in the sense that my overarching, and I'm sure we'll get into for sort of philosophy, is control the controllables. Yep. And I have control over what happens on that day, how I show up, how I present, how I work with people, and the joy or satisfaction or whatever that gives to me. The version that goes to air, I don't have control over it, and it's not for me. That's the product. That's the result of what was for me. So I feel like a real detachment from the end thing, because that's for everyone else to enjoy, whereas I got to enjoy getting to make that with my friends on the day.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah. Because it's going to lead into something I've been thinking about from the acting side. And, acting can be brutal. The rejections, the no's, the waiting for the phone to call. And through my experience of doing the podcast in life, there has to be some form of detachment to be able to cope. And we don't always do it. It's just not how we work all the time. But a healthy level of detachment is kind of crucial. And I would imagine you've had to have a long journey with that, because, it's one in a gazillion yeses and all the things involved in that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty of time where I didn't have a healthy detachment from it, I'd say. And it was a really unhealthy and unhappy time in my life. And I actually stepped back from acting for a good couple of years for a myriad of reasons, which we may or may not have time to get into today. But yeah, to basically then figure out how can I come back to it in a way that is healthy for me, that allows me to enjoy the parts of acting that I do love, which is the storytelling, the creativity, the essentially playing dress-ups with a bunch of other funny, silly people, and not have it derail my whole life or, my identity in the process.
You said that very well. I know there's a journey there, and we will get into it. I've heard a bit about your story, and it's very interesting, fascinating, and empowering as well, the message that you leave for everyone, which I'll get you to share. In that process of potentially rediscovering and learning about yourself, did it bring you back to the core of what you actually like or what you want to do?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was sort of working out what, I guess, a good life or what a successful life actually was, and how my priorities had maybe become skewed, or I wasn't allowing for them to change as I got older, and the things that I really wanted or derived value from changed. So it was, a lot of reframing what I want my life to look like, and then putting in place the things to make that a reality.
That's very cool, because that can be really scary, that when we're going through an extremely challenging situation, which you can talk about, to think that far ahead, what do I want my life to be? Some of the most empowering stories that I've heard, and this is not a commentary on anyone's life, anyone can live the life that they want to live. So when we go through such a tough time, to even when you're in it, it's muddy or murky. But to even have that kind of thought, no matter how long it might take, to say, you know what, I'm actually going to look at how I want my life to live. How can I live a better life? I think that's really inspiring. And I know that you went through a bit of a journey, if you want to talk about it. And I think it's really cool of how there's so many aspects to this, which I really like. So I don't want to talk too much about it, but I think it's really cool that when you go through something that you put your hand up and, you ask for help eventually when it's the right time, and that you go through this journey of self-discovery where you can live what looks like an amazing life.
Yeah, I will say there's definitely a difference between knowing something intellectually to be true and then emotionally being able to do that or live that life too. And there's such a big journey between, getting to a point of acceptance, whatever you're trying to accept in your life, and then also being able to then make the steps from that acceptance to true change.
Agreed. It definitely, it can take a while, but life can be quite long in the sense. I know that sounds bad, but it's not like we need the quick fix straight away. There's a journey to get there. If we want to be the world's best guitarist, it's a terrible analogy. We're not amazing on day one. It takes time and practice and work. Sorry, go on.
True. And it would be super cool to be the world's best guitarist. So maybe that's in my future.
Exactly. Does this start, where should we start? Because I know that you're a springboard diver and I'm not sure if you're a professional, but you're an athlete, and that's very cool experience. And first of all, how do you even discover that?
Yeah, it's a weird one. It's a very niche sport, isn't it? But as a child, I did gymnastics, which I think is a little bit more usual, which I totally think is a wonderful thing to put your children in at a young age. I value the awareness I have of my body that something like that has given me. Very good, like spatial awareness and aerial awareness. But one day I was just messing around at the local pool, doing flips and shit off the diving boards. And a coach came over and said to my mum, she should come and try diving. And then, cue the next 6 years of just being a little chlorine soaked water rat.
That's hilarious. And are you immune to chlorine in the eyes now?
Well, I'm sure we'll get to it, but then I did a job where I was a mermaid, which involved filming a lot of stuff underwater, which is unbelievable that my life would be so deeply water soaked. But I now am totally not immune, the opposite. I hate anything water-based because I've spent so many years and varying degrees of traumatic experiences in water. So I'm done. I'm a bad Australian because I'm like, I hate going to the beach now. I hate going to a swimming pool. I've done my time.
Well, okay, I've got a billion questions. We'll pigeonhole that, but we're very similar. I'm also scared, but that's just because I'm so pasty and I'm scared of the sun. But it is crazy how diving led into that job, which we'll get into in a moment. But also I want to tie up a few things from this because first of all, it's so niche and you've done like even improv's niche, but this is even more niche. When you found this, was this because you were so good at it, and you've alluded to this that you would have had to stop. Was it a part of your identity? Like you are a springboard diver. This is who you are, and you're like a gun at it. Yeah, I can see you nodding. What springs to mind?
Oh, absolutely. I ended up getting a scholarship to a really great school because of my springboard diving, and it was sort of around the same time that I'm a risk-averse person. I'm scared of most things, and
oh, really?
Calculate a lot of like what could potentially go wrong, and just intellectualize everything. And so the fact that I would do a sport that genuinely involves you throwing yourself off a tower of varying heights and spinning a bunch and then landing on your head to the best of your ability, it's nuts. Like it should have never worked. And so there was a great deal of about diving that I did not like and found really challenging. And so for probably the end of my career, I didn't like diving. I didn't want to do it anymore, but I didn't know how to get out of it. And like you said, my identity was that I was known as the springboard diver, and it was something that had afforded me this opportunity to go to a school that my family would not probably been able to afford otherwise. And so it was really tough to be like, what would I be if I wasn't that? And at the age of 14, 15, you don't really have the ability or processing to know how to tackle a question like that.
It is very interesting. Did you think that was going to be your career in the moment? This was your life?
I think so, because I'm pretty like, if I do something, I want to do it all out. And I was I guess, skilled enough and achieving results enough that could have been a pathway. I'm not saying it would have, because I just don't think that I could have kept going and progressing my dives in the way that needed to. But like the girl I was competing against at the time went to 4 Olympics. So, you know, she went that way, and yeah, she did that, and I've decided to wear wigs all the time. You know, we're all busy.
Yep. I love that.
But I can't remember what I was saying about that. But yeah, like it could have, I guess, been been my life of an elite athlete, and I still to this day would like love to go to the Olympics, and I'm trying to figure out like what sports are still available to me, and it's basically down to like archery, shooting, maybe equestrian, I don't know, but my body's not going to be able to do much, but there's still hope.
There's actually, I want to say she's a friend of mine, but a lady that I met, she got into the Australian bobsled team. She just started the team, and yes, I know. And I'm pretty sure she's represented Australia in something. I don't know if it's the Olympics. I'm like, wow, that's random and really cool, because she was looking for something, and Australian bobsled team. Yep. You're
so right, because like Winter Olympics is not a big sort of thing in this country. So you're getting like less people are involved. So there's less competition, the one where you just lie down so you don't even have to really physically do a lot. Like maybe this is my future.
And there was another sport. This is not quite on the international level, but there's a guy I follow who like as a joke covers fake horse riding, where you have, you know, like when you've got a stick and it's got like a horse's head, and yep. And he has uploaded like at least 20 videos, and it is the funniest thing ever. You literally pretend you're on a horse and you're doing all the jumping over the, whatever they're called, the obstacles. And it is the funniest thing. And they're making noises as well. And it's like a legitimate sport now. There's also another one. This is the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. The hot dog eating competition in America. It's actually pretty big. A lot of people watch it. Yeah. Have you heard about this?
Oh yeah. At Coney Island. Yeah.
Oh, I thought I was unique in finding this, but I remember watching it with my dad. We were just flicking channels, and it pretty much, this guy was eating like, I don't know how many hot dogs per minute. Like I couldn't even do that in a whole day. And another guy was coming back and like, is this the greatest comeback in American sporting history? Time will tell. And so there's a lot of sports out there for people that want to try something.
There definitely are. And it sounds like this horse one is maybe the perfect overlap of someone that like does sport but is also a performer and makes believe, you know? So maybe I could be good at that.
I think you would excel at it. So you mentioned that it gave you a bit of, I forgot how you phrased it, but like spatial awareness. Have you carried with that in your life, like just being a bit more aware, and you're probably a bit more connected to your body in that sense as well?
I mean, if you're asking if I can still do a backflip on the trampoline, then the answer is yes.
Oh, okay. Phew, that is exactly why I asked that.
Yeah, and it's a really applicable life skill to have. No, I think it has really helped. It certainly helped in that job where I was a mermaid, because I just was good at, I guess, like holding myself underwater. And I think it does really help in your ability to, I guess, be physical in situations. But I would say the biggest thing that diving and gymnastics, for lack of a better example, like taught me is time management and discipline. Because as an athlete, like you are living a very, I guess, structured life. And I trained 10 times a week for a really long time. So your ability to commit to something, to show up, and then like there's no time for being late to things, all of that kind of stuff. And I think that's a really useful asset, particularly in the creative industry. It can be something that people don't necessarily have or correlate with. And so I really value that it taught me that kind of simple, life skill.
People would be surprised that, and it's not just the creative arts as well, just time management, something I need to learn, but it is like the most important skill in the world. And just rocking up on time and being able to be organized. I'm surprised, and this is not a comment on the podcast, just in life, of how that doesn't seem to be a skill that's highly prioritized, and you're getting it at a young age as well. So it's a life skill that you can apply for everything.
Oh, at this point, like it's not a choice. Like I don't really know how to operate any other way, which is great, but it also like infuriates a lot of people in my life, because I'm like, you're late.
We have a if we're going out for dinner, we have a 15-minute rule. So if you're later than 15 minutes, we're eating without you. So we've got a few little techniques to help our later friends.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Do you miss the because you're an elite athlete doing 10 times a week? Do you miss that side of the training and putting something in your diary and knowing that this is what you need to do in the week?
Oh my God, I loved it. And it's part of the reason why I absolutely should not be an actor, because that structure and consistency resonates so strongly with me. I love having a plan. I love having a goal and I guess like a tangible pathway maybe to get there. All of that stuff is very exciting to me. And I also like that really pushing yourself physically and trying to utilize your body to its maximum capacity. So I think I train now in a way that is sort of unusable for my day-to-day life, because I still resonate with like wanting to work out in that certain way too. Cool. So yeah, if I could become an athlete again, I definitely would.
That is so interesting, because it is it's the exact opposite, the artist journey, especially in what you do, and a professional athlete. Professional athlete, as we said, every single day is planned out. You know exactly what your day is going to be. As an artist, you don't know when your next job's coming. You can have a rough idea, but you have no idea. And to me, that can be very stressful. And especially staying with the way that you like your life, I'd imagine that, especially at the start, would be very hard to manage, because there's not much that you can control. And you talked about controlling the controllables.
Absolutely. And I think you can sort of hear from the way I described the things that I enjoyed about diving. I have a very obsessive personality and wanting to, be in control and things like that. So there certainly, someone said something really smart recently to me about acting. They said, I act for free and I get paid to survive the time in between. And I was like, that's so true, because acting is I would do every acting job for free. It makes me so happy, but it's navigating the realities and the logistics of the life that are the hard part, that you sort of feel like that's what the money is for, is figuring out how to not blow up your life every time you get a job and then ultimately don't have a job and things like that.
It's so bizarre, because not that I was a professional athlete, nor am I comparing it to my journey, but being an accountant, I knew 9 to probably 7 or 8. This is what my time. I have weekends free. This is my life. And so at some level, I like that. Mm-hmm. But then when I've gone on to this, every day is different. And I much prefer this life. Who am I kidding? But it is very different. And it definitely took an adjustment on my end. And I went through a whole journey of, insecurities come out. Society's kind of taught us in a sense that if you're not working, you can almost be a failure or potentially lowlifes, which I don't agree with whatsoever. And there's all these different things, because we don't really see the world. Well, now that you're in it, you do, but we don't really see the world in that way. And for me, it was a challenging journey, especially at the start. I don't know if you've had experiences like that. If you're not working, you're not successful, or you're not an actor, or you're not whatever you want to be.
Absolutely. It's a lot of things happening at once. Like you said, it's sort of, if your identity is too much tied up in your vocation, then you're in trouble, because the minute you're not working, you're like, who am I? But then it is just truly the logistical side of it, and also feeling like you're not able to contribute to society if you're not working, because that's sort of the way that we see our value. It's so intrinsically linked to your job and money and things like that. So the minute you take that stuff away, it can really rattle you. So definitely that has been the biggest challenge, and I guess on brand of the podcast, my failures, whatever, have all been to do with navigating that other side of it, and adjustments that I've had to make to be okay, well, this is the reality of acting, which is why I get sometimes, sorry, I'm going all over the place, but I get angry with drama school, because I think you can act or you can't. You can refine things, sure, but never in drama school are they talking about how to manage your life as a working actor. The 1% that work all the time, sure, they're not going to have to worry about it, but the majority of actors are going to have periods of ups and downs. And I was so utterly unprepared for the reality of what that life was going to be. And it like, yeah, sure, I can like cry on cue or do all this stuff, but if your life is such a mess that like you're not able to show up to the job to do your job, I think that's something that hopefully has changed in acting curriculum since I have not been studying. But I think it's really an important message to be like, the job is the fun part, and like be prepared for the moments in between.
I agree. It's such brilliant advice. I have no idea what's happening now, but a lot of guests have spoken about how, you can be the world's best actor, but then in those moments of no work. So most people from, even on the podcast, you can have an amazing job and then you're not working for a long period of time, or there's smaller little gigs here and there. Like everyone's journey is different, but there's people have found it really challenging when they don't have the work, and they just thought that they were a failure. They didn't realize that that's necessarily the nature of the job, and it hasn't quite been spelt out that this is the game. And if we were told that in the industry, even though everyone's got their own journey, but if we're kind of told that, it would make it a little bit easier. But you spoke about identity and all of that stuff, and I've always found it really interesting that there wasn't that much of a focus, because as you said, there's a very small amount of people that work consistently, and it doesn't mean if you're not working consistently you're not brilliant. It's just kind of the nature of the game and the roles out there and what you're being seen for and all of that stuff as well. So you mentioned that it was quite challenging for you. How have you been able to kind of like manage that or keep yourself in balance during those moments of no work?
Well, let me tell you, there was a time where I didn't manage and balance it well, and it's definitely been an evolving process and something that I still feel like I'm present and working on every single day. Nice. But it did lead to me at a moment sort of taking a step back from acting, because I couldn't at that point in my life manage, I guess, the lack of consistency and the feeling that, like you said before, about like waiting around for the phone and things like that, feeling like my life wasn't in my control, that someone else was sort of dictating whether I could or couldn't do a job or be creative, was really challenging. So I took a step back and got into producing, where you're the one that is making all the decisions and is in control of the idea at its inception and then bringing that to fruition. So that is, I guess, the simple answer of getting to a point where acting is something that I still, really love, and any job that comes up in that world, I'm so excited for it. But I have producing as sort of the consistent undertone, so that my life doesn't fall apart if I don't have an acting job. I'm not waiting on somebody else. My ability to contribute creatively and just to society isn't dictated by someone else. So that's been a really important conclusion, but it was a lot of like mental breakdowns to get there.
Yes, I want to hear about them, but that's really cool to have that foresight, realizing that in that moment something's not working for you. So instead of just kind of like accepting it and doing nothing, you actually put your hand up and you tried something new, and it sounds really exciting. Like that's pretty courageous, because I'm sure there was also an identity factor about being an actor, like we said with the diving as well, and realizing that you can pivot and you're still a success. Whereas a lot of actors have felt like if you change, you're not a success. But to me, that's just pivoting and going in more in the direction that you need in that moment.
Well, it's interesting, because I think we're of a time and a culture now where changing careers is really quite normal.
Yeah.
But I think if you ever stop acting, it's the only possible reason you could stop acting is because you failed at it, right? Because it's the best job in the world. Why would you ever stop acting on your own choice? And so I certainly had a lot of stuff caught up in not necessarily the identity of an actor, but if I stop acting, I've failed. Rather than like acting right now is making my life unmanageable and unenjoyable. But I'm going to keep pursuing it because of what someone else might think about my decision to change. So it was, I guess, a lot of the stuff I worked through was not worrying about what anybody else was thinking, like what's going to serve me right now. And that goes back to what we were saying before about redefining what you want your life to be and what you want success to be, and where success was originally, I guess, very career orientated, and these things that are ultimately, while I can control the work I do for it, it is not 100% in my control. It was like, oh, I think success actually is like being happy and being healthy and being of service to the people around me, and the rest of it is a bonus. And so once you start looking at stuff through that framework, then all of a sudden, like, having to pursue acting at all costs became not in line with my new definition of success.
I love that. I'm clapping. Okay, that's a massive journey in itself. That is brilliant, but it wouldn't happen overnight. So how did you actually get there? Because I'm very fascinated by this.
I think the biggest part was when I moved to America when I was about 23, 24, to pursue acting after having done shows here in Australia. And I think moving to the other side of the world where you don't have your family, your friends, so those inbuilt support systems, and then also going into a position where I was just auditioning for things, so not necessarily having the structures of life around you and a consistent job and income. All of a sudden, and I broke up with a partner at the time, so all of these things that were real stable consistencies in my life started to crumble away. And I think then you start falling back on whatever coping mechanisms you have to deal with that stress. And at that time, I didn't have particularly good coping mechanisms. I had had issues around like disordered eating when I was younger, and so that stuff flared up again, which at the time I really didn't understand or know what was going on, but I've now come to learn that that is a coping mechanism. It's taking control over something that you can control, and I guess numbing the feelings that you're not equipped to deal with at that time. But that was all happening and sort of became all consuming. And so finally, when I was in America, I started to see a therapist. Nice. And that was where everything started to change. And like I said, I'd had issues with disordered eating since I was 14 or 15, but it had taken, 8 or 9 years to be ready to see. All to say that stuff happens overnight. You've got to be ready to want to go. Because when I was younger, I had been told you need to see a psychologist, or it was recommended. But until I was the one who was like, no, I want to see someone and change, it unfortunately doesn't work. But yeah, seeing the psychologist was a huge thing, and it started to help me work through that stuff and I guess have different coping mechanisms so that like life will still have stresses and things will go wrong, but I had different tools on that tool belt to deal with it when it did, and not use like food or something like that as the way that I was navigating things that I couldn't, process at the time.
Okay, you said so many brilliant points. One, that you say this with the smile, so you've obviously done a lot of healing work, so I'm very proud of you. It's a very challenging situation, or situation is not the right word, but you know what I'm saying. And even to just say, which is really important, we hear when we need to hear it. And it basically you're saying the accountability is on us. The therapist isn't going to necessarily save us. We have to be ready or open to hear it. And I think that's really important. And it empowers one that, we can be in charge. We can put our hand up for help, but ultimately the responsibility lies with us. And I think that's really important. And kind of tying it back into the springboard diving, that was the reason that I think you have to stop. And so you've gone on, a bit of a path there. And I'm just wondering from there to acting, what actually made you decide to want to have a deep dive at this particular issue?
I think it's certainly not something I've ever wanted to do, but I think it was because it felt like my life had become unmanageable and I wasn't able to enjoy anything really at that point. But I think when you get so consumed with a mental illness, which is what it is, it really takes the joy out of everything. And I really like to think that I'm a positive person and I like to see the best in stuff, and it totally had taken that away from me. And while at 15 I was physically more unwell, I suppose, in that side of, and I guess we should do all of the necessary trigger warnings in terms of talking about disordered eating and weight and body and stuff, but it's hard to have this conversation not sort of addressing that. But back then, yes, I was hospitalized because my body was shutting down and attacking itself because it was so small. And the physical side recovered, but there's no, when you're in hospital for something like that, there isn't any psychological help done. So while I, for the next 8 years, I suppose, was physically in a safe weight range. I never had done the work to understand why that was even a thing that had happened to me. And so then moved to the other side of the world, things start to change a bit, and all of a sudden I go back to that same coping mechanism. It was then that I was like, oh, I need to understand why this was happening, so that every time something doesn't go right in my life, I don't fall back on this thing that's ultimately harmful and making my life unmanageable.
Thank you for bringing it up. And that's also huge self-awareness, because going through something like that, not that, everyone's got varying degrees of negative relationship with food. We can all resonate with this. But even to have that self-awareness to realize that you actually can't sweep it under the rug anymore, I think that's brilliant. And also on top of that, to share it. It can be one of those things where you don't want to talk about anymore, but I've heard you talk about this, and I think it's so empowering when people talk about challenging situations, and not only are they doing the work on themselves, and it doesn't mean we're 100% cured, but the intention to share a story, and whether it helps one person or a gazillion people, that's a massive benefit. So I'm very curious, what makes you want to share this aspect of your story?
I guess sometimes, honestly, I still go a bit back and forth on whether I want to talk about it or not. Not with people that are actually in my, little circle who have earned my vulnerability, I guess.
Yep.
But I think in terms of mental health awareness, we're so much better than we were when I was, in hospital in 2007. Where I was in the, I'll tell you this story just to paint a picture, but I was in the Royal Children's Hospital, and it was around the Good Friday appeal, and that's when all of the big stars come in and visit all of the kids, but they would not come to the eating disorder ward, because the perception was that any kid that had an eating disorder, it was sort of, your choice to be there, was the vibe that we got, and nurses and doctors were really unpleasant in their treatment of people in that situation, which breaks my heart, because it's not something that I would wish upon anyone. Anyway, also to say, it might be different now, but I still feel that there is a stigma around disordered eating, and maybe it's because it's not something that you can go sober around, right? Like, because it is an addiction, just like with sex, alcohol, drugs. It's a form of addiction, and because you have to have you have to find a healthy relationship with it. And maybe because that, I don't know what it is about like eating disorders. It's a lack of understanding for sure. And
definitely.
Hey, I've lived it for a long time, and I don't fully understand sometimes, so I get it. So I think maybe that is why I want to talk about it, to show that is a part of my life and my history, but also it's not everything. And I still think I'm a, happy, funny person, but I have these darker parts of me too. And so you can contain multitudes essentially, and to not let that stuff sort of derail or define everything about you.
I agree. It's your life, so you define how you want it. I wouldn't say darker parts. We've all, the human experience is not all 100% love and light. We've all got these aspects, but I love that you bring up to show that it's okay if you have something in your past, to whatever it is, that you can still thrive in this world. It's a beautiful message. I cannot believe that it's almost like the hospitals. I'm laughing because I'm shocked that the hospitals are like punishing the kids to not see everyone else because they didn't. That's horrible, and it would make you feel so much worse as well. It feels like a punishment.
Well, yeah, it's adding on like unnecessary guilt and shame in a thing where you absolutely already feel guilt and shame about what you're doing and where you are. But I will go back to what you're saying about the darkness. I don't say having darkness is a bad thing. Like, we all have light and dark. And I think our biggest issue is not letting ourselves have that darkness, and not being okay to like sit in a moment of dark for fear that it will never end. Like, part of all of this is learning, like, it's okay to be sad or to have that shadow self, but knowing that it is just one part in you. So I think it's important to be like, dark is fine, man. I'm dark, and then I'm really fucking light. I'm all of them. I
agree. You said that very well. Thank you for correcting me. I agree with you 100%. I've spoken a little bit about the shadow self. There is, as you say, the light and the dark, and that's part of us, and it's also a choice of what we want to do with that, our understanding, and how we want to kind of give back, whether it's to the world or ourselves. very important because I didn't understand this concept of the shadow self or having negative emotions. So I just thought, this is many years ago, I just thought I was a bad person if I had either the thoughts or I did the actions or I did all of this. And it's such a poor, on my end, poor understanding of how we operate because, as I said, we're not all love and light. We've all got things we need to work on to varying degrees, more than one, and that's okay. And yeah, that's my rant.
No, it's a beautiful rant. I adore that rant because I think a lot of people can resonate with that. And I think you might be similar vintage, like age-wise to me. And I feel like we grew up in a like, you know, what can I do to make you happy? If you're sad, it was very much like, yeah, do anything to get back to that state of bliss. And we also have this obsession with like hashtag grateful, hashtag, you know, happiness, whatever it is, being happy all the time. And while that is a beautiful goal to have, and I understand why my parents wanted me to be happy, of course, you want the people you love to be happy, but it's that thing of then we never knew it was okay to be sad. And so it was like whenever feelings of distress or sadness came up, you're like, oh God, like can't address that, like push it down, rather than letting it out in little like manageable increments. It was like push down until it would explode out in a way that all of a sudden you like cannot control or manage that much emotion. Does that resonate with you?
Yes. Like I even remembering this, not my parents. My parents, I'm very lucky that they had awareness around this. But like even seeing like family friends or cousins, and you just see like as a young kid, you're just kind of like watching the world, and you just see like either, you know, maybe explosive bits of anger, or someone with something would happen and you just kind of see like them look like a zombie and cannot process it. And I always wondered as a young kid what would happen. And you just see kind of like we saw at school, like a lot of people have like mental breakdowns in a sense, or like what's like half year crisis. I was like, I don't want that to happen to me. I want to be able to deal with my emotions when I can. We're not always fully aware of them, but being able to put my hand up and say, I'm not going to sweep this under the rug because I don't want to have a rug which is so like up and down. I'm going to trip and fall and it's going to be horrible in between. But there wasn't that much of a conversation around that side. And it seemed to be that's how you like coped in the world. And, you know, the world's changing, and I would challenge people to say that is not necessarily the best way for an individual to thrive.
But also, I'm quite impressed and floored that that was something that you were cognizant of at a young age, to be like, oh, I don't want to do that version.
Yeah, I don't know where that it probably came from. My mum. My mum was a bit ahead of her time. That being said, I had plenty of stuff. I did not always apply it. I've got a lot of work to do myself. I'm on the journey, but thank you for your compliment. I also saw, and I couldn't find it, so I don't know what's happened, but I heard you speak about that you're writing a book about your experience with your eating disorder. Did the book come into fruition? What's the story there?
So I have definitely written something, and a lot of the, I guess, essays that were a part of it, I've ended up releasing online in bits and pieces, particularly through COVID, as I thought that stuff became relevant. But I think when this was happening, so sort of like 2018, 2019, I think, but also time is impossible to grasp at this point, so it could have been a different time period. But I think I got nervous about like being as vulnerable or honest with those parts of my life that I would want to be if I fully, like the version of this story that I have written would require. And I often have this battle because I think as an actor, it's important to be able to, like, for lack of a better term, disappear into a role. And the more people know about you and the more like social media has so much to blame in this sense, I think it's harder for actors to do that successfully because you know so much about their life. And so I'm constantly torn between like never wanting to say a single thing or present who I am as a person for that reason, but then understanding the great privilege I have of being given some sort of platform and then to use that for matters of importance and to speak on things that, you know, I feel like I want to speak on. So it is a bit of back and forth, and I think like the book definitely gets caught up in that. I love writing. I really found that process cathartic in the sense of like, I guess, channeling all of the things that had happened and then the learnings I'd taken from them. Yeah, some of it is out in the world via the internet, and I don't know where it will go. I feel, I'll be honest, a little humiliated that
You
it's come
have.
up, and I'm like, oh my God, I haven't done that, and I haven't
Oh
seen it
no.
through.
The
But
reason
I'm
that
trying to be chill about it.
the reason I bring it up is no shame whatsoever. First of all, putting pen to paper is unbelievably hard. I've written quite a few scripts, and even though they haven't been made, I understand the shame element if that's what it is. But there's, if anything, it's like the reverse of shame, and I just can't think of what that word is. There's a, whether you show it or not, I think it's brilliant. A lot of people say, and this is not a go at anyone, I'm going to write the next best movie, or I'm going to become the next best guitarist. That's the example today. We actually put pen to paper, and I think that's brilliant. And whether you decide to put it out or not, I challenge you to bring it out, even though you've done it in essay formats, because it's really inspiring. And so the reason that, as I said, I'm saying so much stuff. Everyone's had issues with food, for example, and I've spoken about like issues with sugar, for example, and how there's varying degrees. And it's not even just about food; it's just about how we cope with life. So whether you're someone that identify 100% as having the best relationship with food, it's still really empowering and inspiring to hear, and especially how someone like you with such a great energy about you and what you've been able to do in the world. I think it's really inspiring, but more so on your end that you've been able to put pen to paper and actually write something. That can be really hard, because not only have you gone through it or going through it as well, you're actually taking another level of ownership by, actually putting it pen to paper and going through it and experiencing and the learnings behind all of that as well. I said a lot.
Yeah, and I wonder too, I'm sure a lot of it is trying to be at peace with it or find that full acceptance in that is a part of my life. And I think younger me, I was desperate to be like, why can't I just be normal and like everybody else, even though obviously we know that is not a thing. But I was like, I just want to never think about food again, never want to, I just hate that that's a part of who I am. And I think I've got to the point now understanding that I might never be, let's say, fully recovered. Because I think the terminology they use in the disordered eating community is you're in recovery. And having the pressure, I guess, taken off of needing to, the only way I would be quote unquote normal is if I'm fully recovered and never think about food. Whereas now it's okay, well, it's going to be a thing that probably will be on my mind. And I kind of had this experience and it just completely vaporized, but it's what I choose to do with those thoughts when they come up and not act upon them in the same way. It's then made me not feel like I'm not normal or I'm a failure, because the bar was so well, unless I never think about food again, I haven't recovered, I'm a failure. Whereas now I'm this is a part of me, so therefore it's okay. So then I have permission to continue on my life. And also I have the ability to recognize what that illness did for me, because it was my way of coping with the world when I didn't have any other skills. And so if I didn't, I guess, control or utilize food in that way, I probably wouldn't be here. And I genuinely do believe that. So having gratitude for what it did for me. And then also the parts of my personality that are really tough around food, those I guess more obsessive perfectionistic tendencies, while detrimental in that aspect, are absolutely a huge asset and are what make me successful in many other facets. And so it's okay, how can I use that sort of the way my brain is wired, and rather than change it, learn how to focus it in areas where it's not going to be harmful.
And this is a brilliant, this is not to take away from the experience, but I love how, you've spoken about on the journey there, but you can actually see the blessings and what it's taught you. I think that's really a mature approach and there's nothing wrong with this, instead of just saying you're a victim and this has happened to you, you're also talking about what's happened for you. And I think that's, a higher level of healing. And it's really important, because it sounds like, this is not to poo-poo on the journey, that, has given you some extra skills or awareness within you that you may not have had or been aware of.
Totally. I'm 100% a better person. But then I'm also is this just a way to justify it? So I feel like it was for a reason.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
But if true, who cares? It's my reality. I get to make it.
Exactly. But it's also when anything happens in life, I think, there's a learning behind it. Why did this experience happen? And it also translates into acting. I'm not saying anyone go and have certain experiences, so you'll be a better actor, but it gives you more self-awareness, which is kind of how I see the word. I see that as like leveling up. That the more self-awareness we get, I wouldn't say necessarily life gets easier because there are waves, but more manageable our life can be because we've got that extra skill set, which also isn't taught, but that's a different rant.
It's a very long rant.
Yeah.
Yeah, self-awareness is such a blessing and a curse, isn't it? Because it's one thing to know, I guess, your flaws or the changes you want to make, stuff like that, and then it's another to apply them. And sometimes I'm like, God, it'd be great to just not even know what I was like fucking up, so that I wasn't aware I was fucking up. Like I can't trick myself anymore. So if I start to like do things, I'm so self-aware that I'm like, mate, you know what's going on here? Like, you're not fooling anyone.
I like that. Sometimes I go, oh, wouldn't ignorance be bliss? But it's, you know what they say, I don't know if you've seen The Matrix, taking the blue or the red pill. Once you've taken, is it the blue pill? Can't even remember anymore. But once you've taken that pill, you can't unsee, but overall your life is better because
100%. And you can't go through these kind of things without, I guess, a growing sense of empathy. And I think back to, I was so robotic before all of this because I didn't know how to handle any emotions. So I had no emotions and therefore had no understanding of other people's experiences of the world. And it's given me so much more empathy and understanding, which is something that I value in other people, and really it's one of my things that like I think is important in my pizza slices of life, which is how I like that. Success is like, there's the career slice, there's friendship slice, family slice, all of those things, and like one of them is empathy and understanding, showing up for your community type slice. And so that wouldn't have been available to me, and I now get so much out of being able to be there for the people around me. So yeah, it has given me so much.
I love that. And I think a little bit of extra empathy would change the world massively without taking on other people's stuff as well, which is also a different rant. But you're 100% right. And I understand the robotic nature, because I felt I was very robotic because I also didn't deal with my emotions. And I just don't know why I didn't do it. Maybe wasn't happy at school at some level, or I don't quite have I do, but just varying levels of like living a life more on my terms and being like robotic. And then going on the other end and realizing that, it's actually better to have the negative emotions than to have no emotions at all. I don't know if you've ever seen the film Equilibrium with Christopher, what's his name, Bale, the guy that plays Batman?
Christian Bale?
Christian Bale, yes.
I have not.
That is one of my favorite movies in terms of how we numb ourselves as a society, and how having a range of emotions is very important. It's got a lot of action and stuff. Might not be for everyone, but I just love the message around emotions and feeling, and it was done like at least 20 years ago. So it's pretty cool movie.
I will put it on the list. It sounds brilliant.
Awesome. I want to tie up a few points. You've gone on this amazing healing journey, which you will go on for the rest of your life, of self-awareness and empathy, and we're going to change the world together. That's it. That's a
lot of pressure. God.
Just a little. And so now that you've moved from LA, I just want to get a bit of a timeline. You've moved from LA and you're living here. Do you want to go back to LA? What's the plan? Do you have an idea, or you with the flow?
It's interesting. So I had no plans to move back to Australia. And then, I don't know if you heard of a little thing called COVID, but
no, not familiar.
There was this little sort of blip on the radar that sort of changed the course of my life. But I was in Los Angeles when that happened, and didn't have plans to come home. But then Qantas announced that in 7 days they'll be grounding all their flights, and I just thought if anything happened to my parents in that time and I couldn't get home, I wouldn't forgive myself. So I was like, okay, well, I'll go back to Australia for 3 to 4 weeks, because that's
I love the face that you did as well.
Pandemic will go for.
Close enough.
My guilty pleasure at the moment is going back, and if I find a new podcast, going back and listening to one, like their episodes around February, March 2020, because it's so funny to hear people talk about like, oh, this little thing, and then, oh, this is what it's going to be, and then like watching them, find the information that we now all have readily available to us.
I can't even listen to them anymore.
But yes, I was definitely one of those people. And then I worked remote on a show for that first year, 2020. And I definitely had plans to go back, but as time went on and leaving Australia became a difficult prospect, I started to think, okay, what would it look like if I had to make a life here? At the same time, both of my parents live with disability, and so it became more apparent that I wanted to be closer to them because they're at a point in their life where having me around is really beneficial, and it's something that I really want to be able to do for them too. So making a life in Melbourne was like, okay, this is what is the right thing moving forward. And I mean, that presents its own challenges because I'd been gone for so long. So it really was, it felt like starting again, and that takes time, especially like in a comedy community. It's so much about your network of people and the community that you play with. And so it took a long time to even find that and establish that whilst you're in lockdown for most of it too.
Of course.
So it was
wow.
a really, really not preferable time to move and try and start a new career in comedy. But we got there. And I think
crazy.
to the other, yeah, it was a mess, to be honest. But
I can see.
we got there, and it made me realize that the older you get to, the other things you're prioritizing, in the sense of family and friends, and I don't know if I would want to move and have to build a community again, because it was really hard to, again, like work-wise, but also just your whole entire life-wise, to start again back here in Melbourne. So I would love to go to Los Angeles for a job, but I would love to do the job and then come back and try and keep Melbourne as my base from now on. But, who knows? I've changed. I've moved around so much in my life. That's where I'm at now, and that could all change.
I like that. You haven't put so much pressure on it. That's we won't get into the whole COVID stuff, but that is wild. During that period, you've been living in LA, coming back also to be with your parents. Lockdown's hard to see people. I can only imagine that would have been an enormous stress. Because now you seem to be quite immersed in the Australian comedy circuit. I would imagine that you joined an improv, or you did improv here, and that helped find a community, or was there other ways that you went about it?
No, that's absolutely it. I can literally piece together how it all came to be over the past 3 years, just tiny little, I guess, moments of people showing me kindness and helping point me in the right direction that I'm eternally grateful for. When I first got back, I worked on a podcast with Nazim Hussain and James Milson. And so that was sort of my first feeling of like, okay, like there's like-minded great people here. And that was only because my aunt, of all people, knew a family friend whose son was James, this guy that produced podcasts. And for probably 4 months, I was like, I don't need my aunt's help. I can do it, whatever. And then when that obviously didn't work, I was like, I would love my aunt's help. And so she put me in touch with James. And then through that podcast, we had Wil Anderson on as a guest. And I, in a deluded moment of lockdown, emailed Wil Anderson and was like, do you have any advice for a comedian in Melbourne trying to, basically explained what had happened. He immediately wrote back and was like, he called and we spoke for probably like 45 minutes, and he just was exactly like just incredible kindness. He did not have to do that. He pointed me in the direction of Comedy Republic, the theatre in Melbourne, and said, this is where a lot of like young up and coming comedians are finding a great space. He personally didn't know it, but he recommended it. I went to Comedy Republic. They put me in touch with Ben Russell, who runs the improv there. I met with Ben. He had a coffee with me and again showed incredible kindness and was like, come and do a show and play, and we'll see like what happens. And through that, I then got to do the show at Comedy Republic, which is then where, Ed Cavalier came to watch. And I had worked with Ed a decade ago in a film, but, he sort of rediscovered me there at that theatre to then get Thank God You're Here. So you look at like all of these times that people were more generous than they had to be, than I necessarily like deserved or whatever. But I am constantly floored by people's kindness and openness that has given me, sure, you still have to show up when you get that opportunity, but without any one of those things, I wouldn't have the community that I have now, let alone have the job and the career opportunities. Because it's both of those things. Yes, it's ended up me being on Thank God You're Here, but I have friends and I have people that inspire me, and I didn't have that for a long time moving back to Melbourne. So like eternally thankful to these people that just were nice to a girl who emailed them.
I think brilliant. It's so nice to hear. And in particular, everyone that you mentioned is amazing. And I think we've had Ed and Ben on the podcast, but in particular, Wil too. He's been great when I was emailing him, and you hear so many wonderful stories about him, but to take that call, for 45 minutes, whatever it was, brilliant. He doesn't need to, he's super busy. I think that's also like how we kind of change, whether it's the community or the industry or whatever, is by, helping someone else. And I know that Wil in particular is quite big on helping the next generation. But more importantly, it's scary to like move into a new place and a lot of things happening. But you actually sent, which could have been quite a nerve-wracking email to someone that you've, just met, and to be vulnerable to that person. That can be really hard. But and I'm sure maybe there were moments, do I click send? Do I click send? Or, yeah, exactly. And I think that's pretty cool. You put your hand up and you've done the work, you've had people help you along the way, but, you clicked that email and, you empowered yourself. Whether Wil helped or not, you at least, put your next foot forward to move forward.
Yeah, it's amazing what a global pandemic will do. You're like, I can't care about one email. Like, the world is chaos. So I wonder if it had been a different time, whether I might have been as bold as to do some of those things. But I think I've gotten to the point where I'm like, no is so fine. Like, I'd rather get a no than wonder if there was ever a yes. And so I think it's so fine to ask for help. It's there's levels to that, and obviously some people do take that too far, and I probably have in the past too, who knows. But I think reaching out is fine. I have had that happen to me and I love it, and all I want to do is to be able to be that person for someone that I've had people be for me. Like, that's the dream, is just to how do you keep moving forward and bringing the other people up with you, right? Like, you're only as good as the people around you. So yeah, I think if you're ever wondering if you should send an email, just do it. What's the worst? You never hear back? Sure, you haven't lost anything.
It's very underrated advice, because I know that I've been scared at times. Even doing the podcast, I've been scared to send out certain things. And, sometimes, like, you're right. What happens? Like, I'm just thinking about emails on the podcast, for example. If you don't hear, like, whatever, at least you tried something, and it's empowering oneself to move forward. I think it is brilliant. And so you found your improv community. You've Ben Russell's a guru at improvising. I can see you smiling. So this community is obviously.
I love them so much.
Go on. I love you're being authentic and real about it. I think it's amazing. So what has this kind of done, not only for your career, but just for your overall well-being?
Oh my gosh, everything. It's given me like a home and I get the outlet to be creative and to laugh with other people, which off the back of COVID, where, you couldn't be in a room and share laughter with everyone. Every time that I still get, I did a live show last week, and every time I go out there and hear people clapping, I'm still reminded of what a privilege that is to be in the same space and share that immediacy, because that was, taken away for so long. But it's everything. I can't believe I get to be around people that I think are so funny and that make me laugh so much. It's such a gift. There's so many times in our weekly show we do at the Comedy Republic where I'm sitting watching them and laughing, them being like, oh shit, I got to get up. Because I get so caught up in just watching them and being like a fan of the people on my team. So they're the best. And they're all just kind, nice, generous people. And that's what the world needs more of.
Agreed. And you have what I call an abundant mindset, where you spoke about this earlier, about how if you're in a room of people that are all succeeding together and having fun, then you take those learnings and you can grow together. I think you said you're as good as the person that you're with. So being in an environment where you all respect each other and you can grow, that is the dream. Not even just for a career, just in life. I think that is very important in life. So I'm very proud that you've got that. I want to wrap up
I think
one.
you'll agree too, is like that's, oh, I'll just really quickly say this
No, no,
because I
no,
think you'll
yeah, yeah.
agree. Like with improv, you said you've taken some classes, which we're going to have to discuss at another time. But I would love to hear about your improv journey, because I think improv is such a good foundation of like what we should be taking forward in our human lives, because it's all about like working together as a team, but being present, listening and responding, and that belief that like you're there to help each other and someone else will help you. And it's why yeah, I just adore it as a way of, I guess, communicating and connecting with people.
There, you said it way better than what I can say. I am obsessed, even though I don't do it enough, and that's on me. But I think improv, whether you want to be in the space or not, is a life skill, like you said. And there's 5,000 things I learned. But one of the big ones, especially take away from this conversation, is that you can succeed together. You don't necessarily need to be the man to succeed. You can support your whole cast to thrive, and you are succeeding with them. And I think that goes into kind of my philosophy with the world, that, you know, my success is your success, and vice versa. If you're in an environment where people are succeeding, you know, that kind of rubs off on someone else. And I think, oh my goodness, I could speak about this for, I'm sure we could speak about this for years, but it is so beautiful, the philosophies around improv.
Yes. Yeah, totally agree.
I want to wrap up this one point before we do a rapid fire segment, and I know we've spoken about heaps, but I think this was really interesting, and I don't even know how to say this, because this sounds horrible. I don't even know if horrible is the right word, but when I was doing not on your end, but in the creative space, not everyone is like-minded, beautiful people like you've spoken about, and you had, let's say, challenging situations with agents who weren't necessarily your advocate. And I found this really inspiring story where, you know, you ultimately left working with this team, because in this space we want to, you know, progress, and we think everyone is going to help us. But the moral of this story, I know I'm jumping all over the place, but the moral of this story is that you made a decision where you weren't going to work with someone because they weren't necessarily batting for you. And I think that's really interesting, because we think that we need certain things in our career to move forward. But you had this realization that's not necessarily the case. I've said a lot. Do you understand what I'm getting at, or do you want me to rephrase it?
No, I like there's so much going on in that question. So, but no, I appreciate it, and we'll I guess think about what resonates most with me from it. I think what I realized and maybe got advice on early on was like, you've got to think of your agent as one of your inner circle. So just like a close relationship like any other. And I think a danger actors particularly can get into with that sort of agent actor power dynamic is giving them way too much power and thinking like, you know, they have all of the say and you should just, you know, yes, sir, like whatever you need kind of thing. Like you're a lower status or something. Whereas I very clearly was like, we're a team. I work for you just as much as you work for me. And we're both bringing our individual skill sets to this joint effort. And so just like in any relationship, if it's not working, if it's not healthy, you don't quit straight away. You try and work on those things. But if both teams are not willing to, I guess, come to some sort of agreement or work on those things together, then it's absolutely not worth it. And I value, like, communication is such an important thing. I truly believe nothing is ever bad. It's just how it's handled. Like, you can get the worst news in the world or whatever, but that's fine. A worse thing is not communicating it to someone, or, you know, in modern dating terms, you know, ghosting or leaving people on red, whatever. Like, being told no is fine. It's being told nothing or left in the dark, or that's where lack of trust festers in those gaps in between. So I think, yeah, if you don't have that communication, that relationship's never going to work out. And all coming back to the new guidelines I gave myself for success of being happy and healthy. It's like, if these people do not work into me being able to be happy and healthy, which certain team in the past, like particularly around my weight and telling me that I needed to look a certain way if I was going to be able to do my job, I was like, well, I can't be happy and healthy if that's what you're asking of me at this point in my life. And if that's the only way that you think that I can tell a story is to be, you know, a particular body shape, I disagree with that fundamentally. And so, you know, not the team for me, and the right team will find me or it won't, and then I'll figure it out from there. But you just got to like not compromise on your own, I guess, like values and morals and core things at the sake of other people.
I agree. Brilliantly said, because I'm glad that I left it vague so I could give you the space to say all of that, because that was great. But also in the end of,
No, I just feel like I talked for about 9 hours. So that was horrific.
I was alluding to these things, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. So I wasn't quite sure how to phrase the question, because you went in great depth. So you did very well. But I also think it's really important to realize that the agents, that you're working with the agents, not for the agents, and they're part of your inner circle, as you said. And typically, for what I've heard, is that when you get an agent or a manager or whatever, we will like sell our souls to like please them. But that's not how you build a long-term career or long-term happiness, which is more important than the career. And being able to, recognize that, which I think is really important and brilliant, is, saying you're just not the right person for me. So as an example, I had just before the strikes, there was an agent that was interested in one of my scripts, but they weren't interested in the other 5. But the other 5 are what I write more. And if they don't like the other 5, then they're not quite the right team for me. And although I'm very grateful they like the one script, if you're going to be my advocate and you don't like those other ones, doesn't mean every script I have to write is going to be good, but that's kind of like the bread and butter. Just means we're not the right match, and that's okay. Like, good luck to them. Yeah. And I think it's really important. It's really important to have people in your team or your circles that actually are on the same page. So thank you for sharing that. But
I commend you for that too, because in a world where like I feel like there are so many fences and gatekeepers and stuff, it's hard not to be drawn in when you hear even though maybe that was a conditional yes, you're like, well, there was still a yes. Like, so there would be very big temptations to just go with that and be like, who cares about the other 5? And just run in, cares to the wind. But well done.
Thank you. The only reason, which we'll have to talk about in a part 2, is that I had a TV developmental deal for a show that was kind of like False Promise that could be on Netflix. And after going through like 6 months of contract negotiation, and I'll just keep it vague, I realized that at what part do I want this show? What's the right word? But do I want to give up my entire sense of self just to get a show, which I've been working on for years, at the condition of like at my whole self? And I got to see a lot of red flags. I got to see that we weren't on the same page, and that it was not in alignment. So yes, I might have a show, but it wouldn't actually be my show in the sense of what I built. Obviously, there's 200 plus people that are involved in a show, and it's never going to be my show. But would I give up something just so I can say I have a show where I'm not going to enjoy it? Or am I going to find someone that's a bit more like-minded where we can produce something more in alignment with my vision? And so it was through that experience, which was very hard, that I was able to be way more okay with the agent. Like, oh yeah, that's fine. I don't want to go through like 6 months of like horrible part. Like, yeah, that's all good. Yeah, we'll chat some other time.
It comes back to like the people that you work with are everything, right? Like the end outcome is such a small part of making a show. It's so many hours and years of your life. So if it's going to be with a team that you don't align with, like, my God, that's a nightmare.
I agree. And you're right. You only see like the 30-minute product. You don't see the gazillion hours. And do you want to work with someone, which was going to be like 14 hours a day for 3 years or whatever it was? So yes, very well said. So what we're going to do is a quick rapid fire segment to wrap up the podcast. And I'm going to tie in a few things. Oh, we didn't talk about this. So I'd love to know, what did is it Mako Mermaids? How do you pronounce it?
Mako Mermaids.
Mako Mermaids. What did that do for your confidence getting that role?
Getting the role.
Or working in it.
We simply, at this point in the podcast, cannot begin that. I will come back and we'll do a whole episode on that show. Okay? Okay. There's a little teaser for your fans, but the story excited. Is too long.
Okay, what about the getting the actual role?
Is this the rapid fire, or we're preceding the rapid fire?
Yeah, we can, whatever you want. It doesn't have to be.
Getting the role, it was great. It was about a 7-month process from first audition to booking it. So it was surreal by the end of it. But it was I moved to Queensland to do the job, which I think like the job itself, but also like moving out of home for the first time, it made me grow up and I learned to be independent, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's as rapid as I can say that.
Okay, that's fair enough. I understand not all questions will be in the rapid fire thing, but I'm very excited to hear about part two.
My biggest stress is because I'm, as we know, the audience won't, but I'm tethering the internet off my phone to the Zoom to do this, and I only have 7% left on my phone, so we are rapid fire.
Okay, we will be very quick. What are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? My parents and how they handle, living with degenerative diseases. They're incredible. They're so inspirational and positive.
I know you started the Parkinson pod. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
So I speak to people from the Parkinson's community. My dad has Parkinson's, mum has MS. And so we have different guests on every week, whether they live with the disease or they support someone or maybe a professor in the space, and basically just sharing the stories because so much, is unknown about Parkinson's. It's a very varied disease, and I think stories are empowering to know that you're not alone in that space. So just trying to give people in that community a platform to share their experience and then hopefully connect with others in that community.
Brilliant. I'm glad it's out there. That will be in the episode notes so people can check it out. What's your favorite thing to do when you're not working?
Oh my gosh, I am obsessed with the sauna, and I love reading my book specifically in the sauna. So I'm on my 23rd book for the year.
Whoa.
I read in the sauna, and it's my favorite thing.
Okay, this is a very dumb question. Wouldn't the pages get really wet or that doesn't impact the book?
Not a dumb question. I get asked that most days. I take a little towel in, you guys. It's fine. And also, if the page gets a little bit rippled from the water, but it means I actually read the book, who gives a shit? Agreed.
Very well said. If money wasn't a factor, what would you be doing differently, if at all?
Oh my God, I would probably eat, nicer food sometimes. Cost of living is crazy. But no, I get to do the dream job when I'm acting anyway. So I don't think fundamentally I would do anything different. I'd love to buy my mum a pinball machine. She's always wanted one.
That's so cool and oddly specific that I love that. I love the pin. I haven't played it in years.
She's obsessed, and it's like my dream to customize one for her. So yeah, watch that space.
Oh my God.
I'm doing well when I've done that.
Oh, okay. Yes, please do. What would you do if you knew you could not fail?
Oh my God. What would I do if I knew I could not fail? I mean, I'm like afraid of going in high buildings and like on airplanes. And so I guess if I knew that like those structures fundamentally couldn't fail, I would like enjoy going on like the London Eye and things like that. Like I'm so afraid of being in things that could like break. That's probably not understanding the question properly, but I get worried about like the engineering of buildings and it failing. So I would probably like do a lot more cool tourist things if I was not afraid that they would fail.
I understand. I have a weird sense of fear of heights, where some things scare me, but some don't. It's only really looking over buildings, but I can't figure it out. But
okay.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Sorry to remind you.
I'm so okay with it. I've jumped out of a plane. So it's like weird things, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's nuts.
I know. I wouldn't do it again, but I'm glad I did it.
Congratulations, that's huge.
Thank you. I just bring it up at parties for no reason all the time now.
I'd be opening with that. Hi, Mamie, I've jumped out of a plane.
I should have. I forgot. Any advice you want to give to people who want to try something different on you, but perhaps a bit fearful of doing so?
I think the greatest fear is just not trying at all. Like I think what if mentality is always bad. If I'm wondering what if something, that's always going to be worse than doing it and it not working out even. And the chances are that it will work. It just might take a couple of tries or, a bit of time, but it's worse having not tried and wondering.
Agreed. Last question before I ask how people can follow you and keep up to date with you. What is the one question I should have asked you?
Oh, what a fun question. What is the one question you should have asked me? My favorite question to ask people is the 3 meals that they would eat for the rest of their life if, like, you know, nutrition wasn't a problem, blah, blah, blah. So I would have said you should ask me that so I could then tell you my 3 favorite.
And what are they?
So one is a gnocchi in a creamy pesto sauce with chicken, bacon, mushroom and peas.
Very nice.
One is a fried chicken sandwich with waffle fries on the side. And then one is a banoffee pie.
What's a banoffee pie?
Wow, okay, this is a huge moment for both of us. It's my favorite dessert, and it's a graham cracker crust with caramel, whipped cream, banana and chocolate.
We probably needed a trigger warning on that because I am starving after hearing that. Okay, I'm going to have to make some
I'll
more
make
lunch.
it for our part 2, okay? And then we can do the pod over a banoffee.
Yes, okay, amazing. Thank you so much. Before we go, how can people follow you, keep up to date with you, and also see your shows?
Yes, please come to Comedy Republic Wednesdays at 8:30. We do a show called Something Good. So it's me, Ben Russell, Lena Moon, and Alistair Baldwin. And then we have guest improvisers on with us. It's the best fun. Otherwise, Amy Louise Ruffle is my Instagram. And if I do anything interesting, you better believe I'm putting it on there.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I love your empathy. You're very empowering, and the list goes on. And yeah, thank you so much for doing the podcast and chatting with me.
Thank you for having me. I feel that way about you. I think the show that you have is so wonderful, so many incredible messages, and you facilitate a really great conversation and really give people the chance to share important messages. So thank you.
I love Amy's take on no and rejection. No is a word we shouldn't be afraid of, and Amy highlights how it really is not a big deal to receive a no, but it is definitely worth wondering if that yes was available. We don't need to spend so much time wondering about what would have been if we simply didn't put our best foot forward. Amy gives the brilliant example of sending off an email to Wil Anderson and how this enhanced her life by connecting her with a community. By being brave and putting herself out there, she was able to progress and positively move forward. This takes a lot of guts and courage and is something we all possess. It just sometimes takes a little practice. And who knows, you never know what sending that next email can lead to. So I'll leave you with this epic quote. It is not rejection itself that people fear. It is the possible consequences of rejection. Preparing to accept those consequences and viewing rejection as a learning experience that will bring you closer to success will not only help you to conquer the fear of rejection, but help you to appreciate rejection itself. Robert Foster Bennett. Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.